You are. Sitting on the four corners.
I was just saying.
I know, we just don't do the same thing. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and turn my mic on and say that again for recording purposes. Good morning, everyone. And, oh, I like that. And welcome to the October 6th meeting of the Policy and Innovation Committee. We do not have any committee members participating remotely today, so we can do some voice votes as opposed to all roll call. And at this point, I'd like to ask you to stand and join me in the pledge, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Good morning. Director Andreotta, absent. Director Chapdelaine, absent. Gallardo,
Here.
McCully,
Here.
Rodriguez, absent. Schaefer, absent. Soon,
Here.
Veerkamp,
Here.
Vice Chair Vega, absent, and Chair Dowden Calvillo.
Present. Let the record show we do have a quorum for the purposes of our meeting today, and we do expect Member Chapdelaine to come in a little bit late. Got stuck in traffic. Next item on the agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the committee on items not on today's agenda. We can't take action on said items. We can refer them to staff for future consideration in another meeting. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment this morning?
There's no public comment.
All right, well then I'll go ahead and close public comment and move straight to disclosures. Directors, are there any financial disclosures that need to be made today? Seeing none, we'll move on to consent. I'd like to announce that we're going to remove item 2 from the consent calendar, and we will hear that immediately preceding the adoption of the consent calendar. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar, which now just is the September 8th minutes?
There's no public comment.
All right, directors, do I have a motion?
I'll move.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the minutes. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Let the record show the motion has been adopted unanimously. All right, we're going to move to item number 2. Staff have requested that we remove this item because there has been a minor modification, and I'm going to go ahead and direct that to staff. Eric, is that going to be you, or who will that be?
Let us see, our finance director will handle this.
Okay, excellent.
Good morning. Thank you. So this item is seeking board approval to revise the State of Good Repair Fund allocation for fiscal year 2025-26 and also a project corrections for Sacramento Regional Transit District. In the staff report, staff mentioned that there were the corrections to the Sacramento Regional Transportation's project list were from the revised allocation, but in fact, the amount that was listed should have been for the from the previously board-approved August allocation. So staff is making a minor correction on the staff item, which I believe is a copy is included with that you have there highlighted the changes. So in August of 2028, the board approved the project list based on March allocations provided by State Controller Office, and that was submitted to Caltrans. Subsequently, State Controller issued a revised updated revenue allocation for fiscal year 25-26, which is included in the attachment A and B there, that resulted in an increase of $22,201 comparing to the March estimate allocation that the State Controller provided. So in this item, staff is seeking board approval to approve the revised amount of allocation based on the latest SCO updates, and also to correct the project list for Sacramento Regional Transit Authority for the one of the project that was listed that had the incorrect amount in there. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And again, directors, we all have a copy. It's printed on pretty pink paper, and it has been posted for the purposes of public information on our website as well. Are there any questions? Hearing none. Any public comment, Madam Clerk?
There's no public comment.
All right, I'll bring it back to the committee. Is there a motion?
Dialdo moves approval.
It's been moved approval of the revised recommendations, and it's been seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, say nay. Let the record show that the motion has been adopted. And welcome, Director Rodriguez and Director Chapdelaine. Appreciate that you're here. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is action. We have the first item is to approve Amendment 1 to the budget and overall work program for fiscal year 25-26.
Hi, it's Loretta Sue again. So the board approved the budget and overall work program, or known as OWP, for fiscal year 2025-26 in May of this year. The primary purpose of this amendment number 1 is to incorporate a grant that SACOG received on behalf of Carter for the regional toll equity study. And the amendment number 1 also include adjustment for carryover funds from the fiscal year 24-25. So staff is seeking board approval or recommending that the Policy Innovation Committees recommend to the board to approve the amendment number 1 to the budget and OWP for fiscal year 2025-26 and authorize its submissions to Caltrans and federal agency. So as I noted, included in the amendment number 1 were increases in revenue and expenditures, and also increase in use of reserves and committed fund balance, and also included staff reallocation of our among projects. So the amendment number 1 resulted in an increase in expenditure of approximately $774,000 or 1.6% comparing to the adopted budget for the fiscal year. Again, this is due to the new pass-through grant award for Carter and also the carryover projects from previous year. And then the amendment number 1 also resulted in the net revenue increase of approximately $147,000. This is only accounted for the grant that is anticipated to spend in the current fiscal year. So it does not include the entirety of the grant that could spend over multiple fiscal year. So with that, also there is an increase in the use of the SACOG managed fund of $373,000 that resulted from the project carryover as staff closed out the fiscal year 24-25. Those funds were not spent, so it carried over to the current fiscal year. This includes the SACOG managed fund for the community design projects, also match for some of the federal grant award like the RACE grant, the EEI program, and then also some of the discretionary match. Additionally, SACOG also, the budget also include the use of committed fund balance of approximately $232,000, which again is resulted from the carryover consulting expenses related to the EIR projects expenses, and also cash match for some of the multi-year grant awards. So in summary, the amendment number 1 to the budget and OWP for fiscal year 2025-26 reflects a total revenue of approximately $47.9 million and include utilized reserve and committed fund balance of $2 million to pay for total expenditures of $49.9 million, an increase of $774,000 or 1.6% compared to the adopted budget for the fiscal year. Attached to the staff item are budget schedule reflecting the changes in amendment number 1 comparing to the adopted budgets. Attachment A shows the changes in the overall revenue by funding source, and attachments B through attachment G provide a summary of revenue and expenditures and how revenue and expenditures are allocated across SACOG work plan activity for the current fiscal year. With that, staff is recommending that the Policy Innovation recommend to the board to approve the amendment to the budget. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, and I appreciate the conciseness of the staff report. You went line by line to explain what the increases and so forth were, so I do appreciate that. Questions, directors, for staff at this time?
Nope.
Seeing none, Madam Clerk, is there any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
All right, I'm going to bring it back to the committee, and what is your pleasure? Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, also move.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt staff's recommendation. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, say nay. What? in. All right, we'll show that the record has been adopted unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is information. We have items 4 and 5. Eric, do we have our
Yeah, we
state
can
advocate?
proceed.
They
with
are,
The
okay.
agenda as.
So we can go ahead and proceed with item number 4 then first. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Dowden Calvillo and board members. I'm Blessed Shepherd, State Government Affairs Lead for SACOG. As you know, the California legislature wrapped up its legislative work in September. We have our state lobbyist here today with Politico Group who's going to give us a rundown of end of session activities. And just a quick reminder that in your committee packet is a report from our federal lobbyists. I'm happy to answer any questions and get back to you with more information should you require. Give you Chris Lee.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and members. Chris Lee, partner with Politico Group. Pleased to be here to give you a brief update on the end of session and then answer any questions that the committee might have. So I'll start off with really the main item that took up a lot of the air in the room at the end of session and also led to the legislature voting to extend the session for an additional day so that they were able to land this 6-bill energy, climate change and affordability package in the final hours of the session. And so top line, obviously the cap and trade program, which was set to expire in 2030, was officially extended to 2045 to align with the state's goal for net zero greenhouse gas emissions by that date. There had been a lot of different proposals. The Assembly had a proposal that really kind of maintained the status quo in terms of how the cap and trade program would run, but with a focus really towards driving affordability and increasing legislative oversight over both the program and how funding would come out. The Senate had proposals that were a little bit different in terms of making the program look more like a carbon tax rather than this market trading initiative. And then the governor, as you recall, had put out trailer bill language that really focused on just a clean extension of the program. So just moving that marker out to 2045 with really minor tweaks. The other big element of the governor's proposal was asking for guaranteed ongoing funding for high-speed rail at a specific dollar floor of $1 billion per year, and then increasing contributions to CAL FIRE for forest health and wildfire resiliency. And so after months and months of painstaking negotiations, the final deal really does incorporate elements of all three of those deals. And so the two key bills that are highlighted in your packet, and we'll send in next month's report a more detailed summary because I think what's in front of you was kind of our off the cuff after staying up till 3 a.m. summary on the 13th. But the main bill, AB 1207 by Assemblymember Irwin, extends the cap and trade program to 2045 and changes the name to Cap and Invest. So I'll be good and I'll continue to call it that from now on. But what the key provisions in there that I think are a little bit different and worth highlighting in terms of the Assembly's priorities in this debate was it's going to increase the amount of funding that goes back to consumers in the form of the California Climate Credit on utility bills, and it's focusing those on electricity bills versus before it was both on the gas and electric side, and trying to send those to consumers in months when energy bills are the highest. It directs CARB to support with free allowances the industrial sectors that are at the greatest risk of leaving California. And it requires, and I think this is going to be a very difficult balancing act with a net zero GHG emissions goal, directs CARB to support, prioritize affordability and ensure consumer protections in the design of the Cap and Invest program. And so that bill really lays out the framework for how the program works. And then SB 840, perhaps the item that has gotten more attention from stakeholders throughout this process, directs the expenditure of those Cap and Invest auction proceeds. And so the parameters of the deal that really match up with the governor's priorities are number one, high-speed rail is now basically guaranteed $1 billion flat. There's $1 billion for legislative priorities, so that's money that's discretionary for them to allocate during the budget process. And then the previous programs that received dedicated ongoing funding, so several of which are really important to projects in this region, and particularly the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, where I think the Sacramento region has punched above its weight. So those programs would continue to get flat dollar amounts, but they're kind of after some set asides. So the first set asides are smaller dollar amounts, one being backfilling the expansion of the sales tax exemption for manufacturing, research, and development equipment. It's about $150 million a year. Backfill of the state responsibility area fee from CAL FIRE, which was rescinded after being, pretty controversial for several years, and then a very small allocation to the legislature's attorneys to really get them better equipped to deal with some of the climate related issues, including cap and trades. That's just $3 million a year. So those items come off the top, then the $1 billion for high-speed rail and the $1 billion for legislative priorities. And then those existing continuously appropriated programs are again now set at flat dollar amounts. And those are the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program at $800 million, the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program at $400 million, the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program at $200 million, Wildfire Prevention and Forest Health at $200 million, Safe and Affordable Drinking Water for $130 million. And then a new program that was added, really focused on kind of the environmental justice side of this issue, is Community Air Protection Program. So that's funding for the AB 617 programs for communities where there's high concentrations of emissions. And so there's additional flexibility in how that funding can be used to reduce local emissions, but that was a key priority of environmental justice folks. And so interestingly, I think you can kind of see how each of the parties got a piece of their priorities in this deal. I think the legislative priorities being on equal footing as the high-speed rail provides an opportunity to look for one-off funding for programs that might be priorities for SACOG and others. But in general, it really does align with not super dramatic changes compared to where we'd been in prior years. And so I'll pause there, see if there's any questions on Cap and Invest, and then just briefly talk about some of the other budget items that were approved. And then while we're still waiting for the governor to take action on a lot of bills, give you some quick updates on some of those as well. So
Thank you very much. So we have to get used to saying now cap and invest instead of cap and trade.
it's official.
It's official.
Yeah.
All right.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for your report. And I also had the opportunity to review your written report, as I'm sure my colleagues as well. Are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Chris, for this update. I will say cap and invest, just so I can get used to saying it. I see 26, 27, but are these, I just want to confirm, are these set, or will they entertain other allocations in future years?
Yeah, and it's a little funny because I didn't talk about 25, 26, the stuff in the current budget, because it's a little bit different. The 26, 27 that's an ongoing. So those are in statute. They're continuously appropriated without regard to fiscal year. So the place where there will be certainly a lot of discretion and kind of ongoing budget advocacy and conversations each year is that $1 billion of legislative priorities. And I think that's in reaction to the way the framework works before is, the 65% was set, and then the remainder was through legislative priorities. And this, what it does is it provides certainty to those existing programs that people, had a lot of stakeholder support and a lot of political constituencies behind them, while also giving the legislature some flexible funding that can be addressed. One of the things the Assembly was asking for was, let's dispense with the continuous appropriations altogether and instead have categories of funding over multi-year allocations, because they really wanted to have that additional oversight. And so I think this is kind of one of the outcomes of that, kind of striking a balance somewhere between, protecting the continuous appropriations and providing more, flexibility for the legislature.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to hear that. I just wish that, in the same vein that we talk about fuel reduction and wildfire prevention, that we haven't talked about flood protection, and that, so nowhere in here do I see anything that is in statute about, protecting levees in our flood infrastructure system, which, would also affect water supply. If all the water's flooding out up here, it's not making it down, to our our Clifton Court 4 bay and getting pumped down south. So I think there is a threat to water supply as well if we're not protecting our flood system. And so anyway, I'm glad that there's room in the $1 billion, but yeah, it would be nice if they provided something for flood protection as well.
I think there needs to be another catastrophic statewide event, just like with wildfire, correct? I mean, it took so many
Yeah.
catastrophic events until finally there became a solid appropriation for mitigation, unfortunately.
Yeah, sadly, that is, whether it's a fire or flood, that's the only way we seem to react to things. So, but anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Further questions? Did I ask for public comment? I know it's information only, but
There's no public comment.
all right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. All right, we've got one more update here, fiscal year 24-25 year-end financial report.
And Loretta Sue's gonna come back up for this one.
Third time. Morning.
Okay. Set up here. Okay, so staff have completed the financials year-end close for fiscal year 2024-25. Typically, that goes as a consent item, but since staffers want to kind of highlight some of the financial result and also talking about some of the funding outlook for SACOG, so thinks that timely to kind of bring this item as the information and also as the discussions. So this morning, staff is going to highlight some of the SACOG basic and historical trends. And as you may know, that SACOG budget is slightly different from, the cities or the county's budget. So I just want to kind of provide some explanation, what's included in the SACOG budget and what's not. And then also go over the financial result for fiscal year 24-25. And then lastly, talk a little bit about the 5-year forecast that staff presented to the Policy and Innovation Committee last October, and also looking at some of the funding outlook for the next couple of years. So first, I'm just going to start off with the SACOG, some of the basic information. SACOG managed 2 separate budgets, which include the SACOG general fund budgets, that including the operation, in which is all the overall work program activities and capital equipment and other non-federal funded and state funded activities. And then the other part of that budget is the board and advocacy budget. This is mainly the membership due that staff, SACOG collect from member jurisdictions. And then the second budget that SACOG manage and administer is the CVR SAFE budget. The CVR SAFE approved its budgets, but because SACOG staff is providing service for CVR SAFE, so all the activities is also included in the overall work program. Included in SACOG operation budgets are also pass-through funding, and this fluctuates year to year depending on type of pass-through funds SACOG has, and that pass through to member jurisdictions or to transit operators. Sometimes SACOG budget, the actual expenditures lag from the budget because due to some of the timing that related to the reimbursement of many of the pass-through costs, obviously SACOG cannot recognize the expenditures and revenue until the member jurisdiction and project sponsor bill SACOG for those expenses, especially those large pass-through costs related to the Green Means Gold program, which I will talk a little bit later. And lastly, SIGCOG always started the budget year because it's early in the calendar year. So we start off with the budget with some use of the fund balance just to offset, to close the gap on the budget shortfall. But during the fiscal year, staff work hard to either apply for discretionary grants or, managing the expenses. So over the past 5+ year, we've been really successful in closing that gap without using any fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. So just quickly highlight some of the revenue source that SIGCOG receives. So SIGCOG, as a metropolitan planning organizations, receive regional planning, programming, and monitoring fees for the 6 county programs. And SIGCOG also receive federal formula-based funds for the planning activity for the 6 Sacramento County region. And SIGCOG as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency also receive a fee for administering the transit-related funds. This include the Transportation Development Act funds, the State of Transit Assistance, STA funds, and also State of Good Repair, SGR funds. Additionally, SIGCOG also receive a fee and for administering the 4 county funding program. SIGCOG as a council of government, so obviously, as I mentioned, receive membership due from member jurisdictions. These are these fees are used to pay for federal lobbying activities, technical assistance to member jurisdictions, board expenses, and any peer regions, partnerships, or tours. And lastly, SIGCOG also actively pursuing competitive grant that either is to supplement SIGCOG work, planning work, or it could be a pass-through awards. So these are the 4 buckets of revenue that SIGCOG receives. So obviously there is no general fund balance that SIGCOG receives. So before I go into the fiscal year 24-25 result, I want to just kind of show a little bit about SIGCOG historical operating budget and actuals. So as I mentioned, SIGCOG started the budget year with the use of fund balance. So during the fiscal year, we actively managing the budgets and then also seeking grant awards. So at the end of the fiscal year, always resulted in, so far for the past 5 years, in a net increase to fund balance instead of use fund balance. So what you see on this chart here is that the first 2 bar, which is the light pink, that represent the adopted revenue from the adopted budget, and then also the expenses in the light blue, which is the adopted expenditures. And then the next 2 bar, which is the dark pink, sorry, the color might not come out exactly what they look like there. And then also it's the dark pink represent the actual revenue received, and then the dark blue represent the actual expenses for each of the fiscal year there. As you can see, for the past 5 years, we ended the fiscal year with a positive or increase in fund balance. I also want to note that this slide here is slightly different from the one that Lynette sent out on last Friday. I made a typo in fiscal year 24-25 where I included the use of the fund balance that is related to the Green Beans Go fund, that revenue that we received in fiscal year 23-24, but then the actual expenditure didn't happen until 24-25. So I just adjusted the revenue associated with that. So this would be more consistent in terms of SIGCOG operating budget that does not including the use of reserve funds and also the pass-through revenue and expenditures that related to the Green Beans Co program.
So Loretta, if I could just jump in on this, I think, one of the good takeaways on this slide really is to think about, when you compare, for instance, the adopted revenues and the actual revenues, we really try to be conservative in what our estimates are. And similarly on the expenses, to the extent we have discretion on things, we might put in things that we think may happen. And as we have the ability based on the actual revenues, we might delay work or scope down work to make it fit in the actual available revenues.
Thank you, Eric. Is there any questions before I go on with the fiscal year 24-25 results?
Any questions from directors? I will say I do like the color scheme.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on to fiscal to 24-25 results. So just want a quick highlight on the budgeted revenue for the fiscal year. The total revenue budgeted is including, so it's 37.3 million of revenue projected to receive during the fiscal year, which make up a different category. Obviously, federal about 38%, state 42%, local mainly that is the TDA fees that SACOG receive, and then membership due and other revenue make up the remaining 6%. So that's the adopted budget there. So here is a table that kind of comparing the actual budget versus the actuals, and then in terms of what is how we're doing compared to what we budgeted. As I mentioned earlier, SACOG budget included a large amount of past due awards. So the fluctuation in terms of the timing of when to recognize that revenue and expenditures is depending on when member jurisdiction and project sponsor actually completed their work and then submitted for reimbursement. So as you can see that, federal is, we're under received by approximately 4.1 million, and this is mainly related to the RCN Green Means Go grant award that SACOG received, and majority of that funding passed due to project sponsors. And because there were a delay in executing the funding agreement and also executing the subrecipient agreement with those project sponsor, and also ongoing effort coordination with Caltrans on the DBE compliance. So that had a delay in terms of the start of those projects, but those are underway right now. On the state fund, obviously, the bulk of the under budget also related to the Green Means Go, the REAP2 funding from HCD. This is due to the delay with the state imposed cuts on the REAP2 funding earlier this year, that put us in a pause for a while before when that budget finally finalized it, and then member jurisdiction and project sponsors start working on those projects. So definitely there were a delay in terms of when the actual work actually started on or completed on those projects, on some of the projects. But we are on par to, on target to complete those projects by the expiration day of December 2026. So staff is working closely with project sponsor to make sure those are completed by then. So, and then lastly, just on the other and interest income that resulted in an increase of 341,000. That is mainly just the interest income that was higher than projected in the budgets. And lastly, and the fund balance, obviously there is a reduction use of fund balance compared to what originally budgeted. So I'll go over a little bit more detail about the fund balance in the next couple of slides. Moving on to expenditures. So the total expenditures budgeted is 41.2 million. Obviously, as you can see from this chart here, staff and benefit costs make up 34% of the total budgets. Consulting costs, that is mainly the consulting expenses related to the blueprint EIR work, the operator long-term financial plan, and also some of the consulting related to the discretionary grant that SACOG received. And over 44% is related to past due costs, which mainly those are the Green Means Go funding that SACOG receive at the federal level and also the state funding. And other costs make up the remaining 11%. And in comparing the budget to actual, so this is the final budget and also the final actual expenditure, obviously we're still going through finishing up the final audit. So these are the preliminary numbers. So there might be some slight adjustment to these numbers here. As you can see, the bulk of the underspending is in the past due category. As I mentioned, those are related to the two big, large Green Means Go grant award that we are passing on to the member jurisdiction. So I think we will see more of those activities in this fiscal year there. We also have a saving of in the staff and benefit category. This is mainly related to just the timing of when we got in terms of the staff turnover and the replacement of those staff there. So that resulted in 750,000 of the saving, and which that allowing us to be able to cover all the expenditures for the fiscal year without dipping into the fund balance as originally included in the adopt budget. Moving on to the use of fund balance. So SACOG has adopted a fund balance policy based on the government accounting standards. So any use of any established and use of the fund balance does require board approval. So we have a couple category of fund balance. So the first one is restricted fund balance. These are funds that are restricted for certain projects or use. For the fiscal year 24-25, the large change in this category is related to the deferred revenue for the Green Means Go that we received from SGC. The revenue was received in fiscal year 23-24, but the actual expenditure and reimbursement didn't occur until the fiscal year 24-25. The next category is the committed balance, fund balance. This category including board authorized use of SACOG fund balance for federal grant match, and then also included in SACOG managed fund, the community design projects, and also the support for the EEI program. And one of the large match that the board approved was the use of SACOG managed fund for the RACE grant. That was 1.3 million match, but because that is spent over multiple fiscal year, we only reflected the use of those match on the current fiscal year. So only what is anticipated for the current fiscal year is included in the budget, and the remaining will be included in the future budget years. And then also included in this category, we do have a pre-funded pension trust. The next category is these are board assigned fund balance that are make up of multiple operating reserve, that including legal reserve, capital equipment reserve, contingency, and also operating reserve. So those are classified as assigned fund balance. And lastly is the unassigned fund balance. So obviously that is at the board discretions to how to use the funds that is left in the unassigned bucket. Historically, the board has used these funds as a priority investment. Like I mentioned, cash, a match for a cash for a new application or new grant for a federal or state program. And also board has authorized using the unassigned fund balance to offset like the budget shortfall within the fiscal years. So I just want to kind of provide an overview, the different category of fund balance, what was, and then the activity and the use during the fiscal year, and what the ending balance as of June 30th, 2025. As you can see in the restricted and committed, it decreased by 2.8 million. And as I mentioned, this is mainly related to the Green Means Go deferred revenue that was received in one fiscal year and expenses incurred in the current fiscal year. And then the other change is related to the SACOG managed fund committed project, that including, the cash match for the RACE grant, the EEI, and also the community design projects. It has a net result of 232,000. The reason is that there were interest income received against that. So that's the net change in terms of the use of the SACOG managed fund. And then there's also the increase in fund balance. Obviously, there were investment return on the pension trust, which is approximately 210,000. So current balance is about 2.2 million. And then also increase in unassigned fund balance. That's also resulted to the increase in investment returns. And lastly, there's also an increase in operating reserve. During the last fiscal year, the board approved to increase the operating reserve by 500,000. This is based on staff recommendation with the unused unassigned fund balance that was included in the original adopted budgets. I'm gonna pause for a minute and see if there's any questions before I continue.
Any questions? Thank you.
Moving on, I'm just going to provide a quick overview of the baseline forecast that was prepared in last year, and then also talk a little bit about the future outlook. So this is the 5-year baseline forecast that staff prepared last fiscal year. Again, this does not include the past due revenue and expenses because that fluctuate year to year on some of the major programs. So this is just sort of SACOG baseline operating expenses. So what you see in the bar is the expenditures by different categories. And the line, the black line on top is representing projected revenues. So obviously we're in fiscal year 25, 26 right now. We haven't updated the 5-year baseline forecast. The reason is there's still a lot of unknown at the federal and state level in terms of the funding that coming into SACOG, right? Staff did do a preliminary revenue look and also operating expenses. There are not a huge fluctuation in terms of the expenses, and then revenue within what SACOG already have or committed. It didn't really change much, besides it could be fluctuate from year to year. So therefore, we have not updated this forecast, but as things will, as we learn more about the fundings from the federal level and state level, that staff might bring back a different version of the forecast later, maybe next year. So as you can see from this baseline forecast, starting in fiscal year 27, 28, there will be a shortfall in terms of the budgets of actual budgeted expenses comparing to revenue received. This is largely due to the ending of the REAP-2 Green Beans Go funding that SACOG received, and the RAISE grant, also the one-time SB 125 funding. So that caused the budget shortfall for the fiscal year 27, 28 and onward. So as I mentioned, this does not including any of the new potential revenue that SACOG might receive. So what staff did was, in this slide here, so staff kind of put together a couple of different scenarios in terms of the additional revenue that SACOG may potentially receive, right? So same thing, the bar represent the projected operating baseline expenses, and the, sorry, these color doesn't really kind of show up. So the first bar line there, it's like the purple one is the baseline revenue that you saw on the previous slide. And then so the red line on top of the purple line is representing a scenario that staff built to include, let's say, additional 1.5 million in grant awards starting in fiscal year 27, 28. And what does it impact in terms of the overall budget? Obviously, that's still not enough to cover the budgeted expenses. And then the next scenario staff did was the yellow line, which you see there on top of that. This representing an increase in formula funding for SACOG. Currently, our national association is lobbying to increase the planning funds, the PL funding for Metropolitan Planning Organization up to 100%. And also there are proposals to convert some of the competitive programs to formula-based program for MPO also. If we are successful in that, then obviously there will be additional revenue coming into SACOG that is related to these activities there. But instead of using 100%, staff is assuming a 50% increase in the formula funding, and that's where you see in the yellow line there. And with that, obviously that would enough to cover the budgeted expenditures for fiscal year 27, 28, and then onward also too. And lastly, the third scenario that we did also, just what if there are some additional increase in funding from the regional funding program? We're just adding a 500,000 onward in fiscal year 28, 29, just as sort of kind of scenario. Obviously, there's still a lot of unknown at this point. There's so many changes at the federal level and state level. So none of these are certain at this point. But again, there's still, uncertain, but it's not like a huge gaps that we had to ensure to make sure that we are in balance with our budget there. So just kind of highlight some of the funding outlook, as I already kind of mentioned. Obviously, as I mentioned, there will be potential increase in the federal formula funding that would impact SECOG revenue source, right? And then also potential increase in the state formula funding that also would help with SECOG budgets. And then lastly, there's also, there is the discussion of state road usage charge to offset the gas tax decline. So that's something is also in the works. Obviously, we know about the one-time funding decrease or ending, which including the SB 125 funding that would be ending in fiscal year 27, 28, and also the race grant and the Green Means Go, the REAP 2 funding. And then also, we had seen a slowdown of the anticipated TDA fund, which is sales tax revenue, and that would have impacted SECOG in terms of the fee that SECOG receive also too. But then there's also some new grants or fund source opportunity. As I mentioned, we continue to pursuing new grant activities, either for SECOG work or for member jurisdiction at the state or federal level. And then there's also the new state source funding that we are actively working on for the Green Means Go program. Obviously, there's nothing at this point is certain again. But as I mentioned, based on the projection here, that SECOG has been exhibit sound financial steward management in terms of securing discretionary grant and also managing expenses, which result in approximately over $3 million of fund balance over the last 5 years. So given the current funding outlook, staff does not anticipate any significant concern in terms of SECOG budgets. So obviously, any budget shortfall can be likely addressed through the additional grant award or temporary use of the reserve fund balance or unassigned fund balance. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions or facilitate any discussions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from directors? You did such a comprehensive job that just left us all, speechless.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that report. And no public comment also, Madam Clerk, correct?
There's no public comment.
All right. I always ask for public comment even on informational items. Next item is receive and file, which is not a presentation before us. Under other matters, I just wanted to bring up, we did have our retreat last Friday in Elk Grove. Thank you very much. So I thought it was very valuable opportunity to get to discuss regionalism at its best and get to know each other a little bit better. But one of the issues that came up was someone had suggested establishing a committee for better advocacy for SECOG. And I kind of voiced out, we do have the policy committee because we as a committee do certainly take consideration and take position recommendations to the full board on particular pieces of legislation. But I wonder if there would be an opportunity at another meeting, because obviously this is not a noticed item, but maybe just to further talk about how SECOG can utilize members in more of an advocacy role when possible. I know that oftentimes we do get called to come and testify, and sadly, a lot of times it's short notice because that's how they work across the street. So for a lot of us, it's tough to get down here that quickly. But just kind of thought there might be some opportunity for some discussion and maybe utilizing not just our committee, but the full board just based on that discussion. So
Yeah, we'll certainly look at agendizing that. Obviously, the chair and vice chair of the board are here, so
Yes.
they can also lead outside the meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for bringing that up. And it was a pleasure hosting you all. I'm glad you made it down to that part of the county. Just to add a little context, Senator Cabaldon, who was our guest, basically said that he wanted us to do more advocacy. He wanted to hear from not just us, but say the COGS, other lack of a better term, trade organizations, I should say. But there's also a recognition that as large as our 6-county region is, it's still small in comparison to, the other parts of the state. So how can we, as SECOG, leverage our mega region COGS, right? And then take that maybe even south if possible. But I know there's CalCog as well, but maybe CalCog is too broad. I think if we can advocate as several different cogs, that would still be very powerful. So
We're happy to come back and work with our Director of Government and Public Affairs, Christina Lucky. Oscar Villegas is appointed to the CalCog board as well. So certainly there's opportunities to look at how we might better leverage these external organizations, but also SACOG itself, and we can work with the incoming chair on that next year as well.
Great, thank you. And I thought what the senator had to say was very profound in that he said, don't just come up as a suck up, if it don't, and it was more to the larger groups like League of Cities, which I sit on that board of directors. And he was talking about, it's not effective if you're just supporting legislation because you don't want to make us angry. And I thought, amen. But they also said, don't just oppose things flat out. Also, if you can do something better, show us. And so I really appreciated that. So something that speaks to both sides of the aisle, and I appreciated that. So
totally agree.
good discussions. Good, thank you. All right, are there any other comments from the board? Seeing none, without objection, I'll adjourn. Hearing no objection, we are adjourned before 11 o'clock.
And our next meeting is in